Hi everybody, Jane here. Thank you so much for watching today. Today I'm going to be creating a project in this journal. Now this is one I created myself by cutting up pieces of watercolour cardstock and creating a cover. And I like this one because I can take the pages out and use them flat, which sometimes is easier than creating in an actual art journal book. So today I'm using the Be Crafty stamp set here, which I think is something called Sketch Circles. It's a really old stamp set. I don't think it's even available anymore, but any sort of circle stencil or circle stamp set would do the same job. And I wanted to create a really fun and funky background for some collage. So the emphasis for this project is really the background. This is the bit that I'm really putting all my attention into and not so much on what's going to be going on top of it. So I'm starting off by stamping these circles all over my piece of card, and I'm using Versafine Clair in Nocturne, which is a black, and this ink is oil based, so I can use it with water reactive products over the top. Now my aim is to use the Gansai Tambi's Granulating Watercolors from Kuretake, and I used them recently in a couple of projects, and I will link one of them down in the description box, and I'll also link it at the end of the video because I've been having such fun with them and I wanted to use them in a slightly different way but still to create a really cool background. So I've used 3 different sizes of circles here. The big ones go slightly off. But here are the 2 sets. So I've got granulating set 1 and granulating set 2, and I'm going to use my size 12 Neptune brush from Princeton, which is a really soft brush. It's lovely to use with really watery background. So I'm adding water into that circle first. I did forget on the next one, but I do then go back to adding the water. And I just wanted to put the colour around the edge of the water because what I had the idea that I was going to use more than one colour in each circle. And I will list in the description box all the products that I use for this project as usual. So I'm going with the big circles and then I'm adding colour into the smaller circles, and I'm just picking and mixing the colours from the 2 different sets here. So one is the Aurora set and one is the Cosmic set. I do really love the pinks and the purples and the reds in this set. They have to be my favourite. And you only really get the true effect of these watercolours when they start to dry and you see them start to split and granulate. Now, they are I find quite muted colours to an extent. Even the brighter ones are fairly muted compared to other sorts of colours that you might use. So like if I use my core watercolours by Golden, they're very, very pigmented, very bright. But these have got a lot more mutedness to them. Is that even a word, mutedness? but I do love them, especially for things like cosmic backgrounds, you know, like galaxy type backgrounds. And I think if you're wanting to do something a little bit more subtle, but you want that splitting of the colours, it can give a really lovely effect. But because they are splitting and granulating, they do need quite a lot of water to really get the true effect. So you will probably notice on these circles that the big circles where there's a lot more water, a lot more space, I get a lot more granulation, a lot more splitting than on the smaller circles where there's only a small amount within that space. So that's something to bear in mind when you're using these paints. And some of them split a lot more than others. So for example, this Cosmic Green that I'm using right now, it only splits into like a blue and a green, and it's not as distinct as some of the other colours. So that's something also to be aware of. I then decided that I wanted to add some more circles within circles. So I'm going for the medium and the small stamps and going back in and just adding some into the big and medium circles that were already on the page. I didn't worry about with the little circles because I felt they were small enough already. And then I made sure that ink was dry because the oil-based inks like Versafine and Clair do take a little bit longer to dry, although when they're on watercolour paper I find they do dry quicker than if they were on something like a smooth sort of coated cardstock. And then I'm going in with a different colour inside the circles just to create another effect. So I was making sure that the outside circles were all dry before I did this stage. I do find with these watercolours that they once they dry, they don't overly reactivate once you put something on top. I don't know if that's just the type of cardstock I use or because I do make sure they are dry before I start doing anything else. But I haven't found a problem so much with them moving once I start to add something else on top. But I am also quite gentle when I'm adding things on, because I don't want to scrub it too much and then start scrubbing at the colour underneath. So I'm just now adding in some of this extra colour. I made sure that was all totally dry before I moved on to the next section, and I wanted to add a little bit more definition in some areas, and I wanted to have a play around because, like I said, this was going to be a fun background. So I've got my Stabilo woody pencils out, and these are a water reactive pencil, and I started off by adding a bit of colour and watering it out. And then I sort of thought, oh, I don't know if I really like what I've done here. I preferred just the look of adding the pencil without watering it out. And so I went in with some sort of matching-ish colours over the tops. And I'm just adding some circles and some lines just to add a little bit more interest inside the circles. I also added a little bit of the gold Copic Acrea into that last section as well, just to add a little bit of bling. And that made me think, oh, I think I want a little bit more, and I want to add something to the centres of these circles. So I got this little dinkable, it's a circle stencil actually from Be Crafty, and I just used the centre section just to add something to the middle of each of these circles, just as an extra bit of pattern, extra bit of definition. And I'm just using a cheap acrylic gold paint that was from HobbyCraft. It's nothing particularly special, but it works really, really well. And I'm just adding it on with my stubby stencil brush. Once that was all dry, I went to choose my collage, and I went into my Face It book from Collage Soup and found this lady. Now, I wanted it to be a black and white image because I didn't want it to blend too much into that background. The background is sort of the star of the show for this page for me, and I just wanted something that added a little bit of interest. And because I'd gone for the black and white in this image, I chose one of these Dylusions bigger back chat stickers. I think it's set 2. These are quite snarky, sarcastic stickers, but I picked one that wasn't too bad. And they come in strips, so you do need to sort of trim them down to get the bits of the words off of each strip. And I also trimmed it so that I could fit it how I wanted it. Now, the good thing about these stickers is they're not super sticky. So if you do what I just did here, which is I put them in where I didn't want them, I decided I didn't like it there, you can easily pick them up and move them. Now, I have left it like this without adding glue, but I will probably go back in and add some glue to them because they aren't the stickiest of labels. So here is my finished project. So thank you ever so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, do please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love it if you could do that too. And at the end you'll see a list of my lovely super supporters who are my YouTube members, and I will add information in the description box if you're interested in finding out more about that. So until the next time, thank you ever so much for watching, and bye bye.